Yeah, so welcome everyone back to the Nostalgic Dragon channel. And today we have a guest. I'm very happy to invite David from Four Corners of the Page. He's, like many of us on the channel, a passionate Malazan reader. So we are going to talk about Malazan today, different lenses. How can you read Malazan? How can you interpret it? How can you enjoy it? And before we start, I would like to welcome you, David, and want you to present yourself and your channel, of course.
Hello. Okay, so Shrikant is telling you something very nice. The reality is I'm passionate, but I'm clueless. So I love Malazan with all my heart. I've recently just finished a reread of Gardens of the Moon, and enjoyed it immensely the fourth time. But at the same time, I think it's important to acknowledge that these comments we give that we talk about are at least from my perspective. I'm not gonna throw you in on this. Extremely amateurish. But I'm very excited to kind of just have this Malazan discussion with you. It's been a long time coming, and I think we're going to have some fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And for you watching, of course, check in. Go to David's, of course, YouTube channel. Look it up and subscribe if you want to. And if you have ideas about how you approach Malazan, please comment as well. So this is the Gardens of the Moon, of course, and you, David, had another copy, right?
Yeah.
One, I
Who's
think.
that person on the hill? Nobody knows. It could be
Right.
anyone.
Yeah.
Faceless magician.
And yeah, that's good that you are saying that because some of you, at least on my channel, are new to Malazan. I want to make you interested in Malazan Book of the Fallen and all its, vast world and world building. We are just going to talk about Gardens of the Moon if we touch it, maybe not so deeply either. I don't think we need to do that to talk about the lenses, but just so you are aware of that, if you haven't read Gardens of the Moon or just, are maybe 100 pages in, maybe you should be a bit careful then when it comes to spoilers. But I think most of you will be okay, and there are so many details in Malazan Book of the Fallen, so even a small spoiler, you will probably forget it when you're 7 books in, if I'm honest. So, yeah,
I think
so, yeah.
I think there's also a thing with Malazan that and maybe you'll disagree with me on this, and I won't spoil the series. But I think Malazan is an interesting case in the case of spoilers, isn't it? Because I think sometimes when we're first reading Malazan, a couple of spoilers are okay. Because I do
Mhm.
think reading Malazan, and I spoke about this in a group chat on Malazan difficulty on Alex Books with Banks channel, but I think sometimes reading Malazan by yourself is an amazing experience. I had that with The Crippled God. And
Mhm.
sometimes reading Malazan in company is also
Mhm.
amazing. Having someone a little bit ahead of you, kind of giving you hints about what might happen, can also be a very fruitful experience. So I don't
Mhm.
think we're going to say anything that's particularly kind of in your face spoilery. But
Mhm.
I think a little bits of shrapnel here and there is kind of okay for the purposes of this conversation. I don't know if you'd agree or not with
I
that.
agree. I agree. I've done it before, so and people are
Yeah,
still here, so it probably works.
yeah.
And yeah, I will just throw out some perspectives. We call it lenses here, different lenses, how to read Malasan. Like you have the glasses and you look into the book with different, we can have different values or different ideas. You go in with different experiences when reading Malasan. So I will just throw out the first lens here, and that's the family lens. And since David is guest here, I'm very interested to hear about how if he thinks there is a lens or a perspective of family or not, and if it's a perspective, what is it, right?
Well, first of all, I guess a few things. First thing I didn't say at the beginning is that I'm very happy and grateful to be on your channel. And forgive me for not saying that from the jump, because I've been very excited to talk to you. Second of all, I think the lens thing is interesting because I mention on my channel all the time to death. I'm a teacher. And one of the things we teach kids to do is interpret things through literary lenses, right? Like the ecological lens or postmodern lens or feminist lens or what have you, and encourage kids to do that themselves. Choose something they're passionate about and apply it to a text. But very often, um, kids will ask, why? What's the point? Like the story's there. Do you know what I mean? The story exists and we've read it and I understood it. So why are you trying to? They almost see it as, I don't know, adding something extra that's not there. And I'm wondering, just before we get into family, which I
Mm.
trust me, I'm delighted to talk about,
Mhm.
um, if that's an interesting thing to talk about, why are we applying these lenses to our fiction at all? Why is this a worthwhile conversation to have? Do you mind if we address that quickly
Right.
very
So,
first?
yeah, I think it's a relevant question because I think
Yeah.
it's. Wrote another lens here, written down another lens. That's the personal lens. I think it ties into that. I mean, what do we invest, or how do we interpret the story?
Hmm.
As you know, I have this spiritual lens a lot when I'm reading, and
Yes.
I know you. David has also interviewed Steven Erikson, so please listen to that if you are interested. And I also asked him about that. Maybe I said, like, maybe it's just my interpretation. Maybe you don't have any, purpose with spirituality or anything like that. I don't know. I think it's both relevant to do that because it could be objectively true that it is a kind of lens, from any kind of perspective, like family or civilization in Malazan, for example. But equally, it could be just my own, justification of reading, of liking the
Yes.
book or reading it. I don't know. What's your take?
I think this is interesting. We're now talking about through which lens we approach the topic of lenses. So it's taken me about 6 minutes for us for me to steer us magnificently off course, and I do apologize.
It's
Um,
okay, no
but
problem.
I think what you said is absolutely right. Like, um, it is personal, and but so when a student says to me, "Why are we adding ourselves into this story?" Because we do that anyway. Do you know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like we,
Hmm.
we we read stories and we connect with certain characters and we connect with certain themes. All we're doing, I would argue, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts here,
Hmm.
is by applying lenses, we're kind of making that personal experience and our passions that we bring to the book explicit. And we're giving ourselves the toolkit through which we can dig into our subjective reading experience further.
Hmm.
I quibble over the word subjective there, but I kind of agree. Like reading is subjective, and I'm so excited to hear you talk about the philosophical and the spiritual lenses of Malazan because I know you have so much good content on your channel about that.
Thank you. Yeah.
But whenever my students say to me, "Why are we doing this?" I said, "Because you're already doing it. It's just about helping you unearth that in a more critical way."
Mm.
Would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think what is I mean, with this book, of course, that we are talking about, what's
Yeah.
this without the personal lens? I think when you write as a writer, I'm writing just for myself, so I have never published anything, so I don't know how that is, but
Yet.
still, the meeting between the writer and the reader is crucial. There is no book, at least no read book, without the reader. So I think the meeting has to happen, and yeah, it's unavoidable. And without the meeting, no story, no book, no YouTube content about the books, and so on. So maybe that's not an answer, but it's just a reflection that the reader has to meet the writer, and that is with his or her personal experiences. So.
I think that's a magnificent answer. Um, yeah, I think the reader meeting the writer, because if the reader isn't meeting the writer and the writer isn't interacting with the reader, it's just ink on wood, isn't it? It's just wood pulp.
Mhm.
No offense,
Yeah.
Gardens of the Moon, but you for the book to be kind of a real living entity in the world, you
Mhm.
you need that readerly interaction, even if the reader is just the author reading it again. I'd still argue
Mhm.
that's valid. But
Mhm.
yeah, sorry for derailing us instantly.
No, it's
Um,
okay.
but yeah,
It's okay. It's good. I mean, so yeah, without the meeting, there is no writer, there is no one reading the book, and there is no one, theorizing about it. So I think that means the book is not alive, at least for me. The book's
yes,
gets alive by thanks to the readers and the author, of course.
yes.
Um,
We were talking about family before, right?
yeah, I was thinking, orientating myself a bit there.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, but that is a lens, though. So I know you are interested in that lens, as I understood you at least. So I'm curious to hear. That's your, and also mine in many ways, because if you read Malazan, there is a lot of family and relationships and
Yes.
tragic destinies and strange relationships. So I'm curious
Yes.
to hear about that lens when you apply family to Malazan and especially Gardens of the Moon.
Yes.
What happens?
Okay, what I'll do here for the sake of avoiding spoilers or addressing the possibility of spoilers is I'll name names, but I'll try not to reference specific plot
Mhm.
events. I think Right, okay, I spoke about the fact, I always talk about the fact I'm a teacher on my channel. The other thing I always talk about is my kids. Um, and so again, it's personal, right? When I approach this book, I'm approaching with the baggage of the world that I have. And for me right now, if anyone has a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, they'll know that that is very consuming. And so I think when I come to fiction, especially this read around, that's what's at the forefront of my mind. But thinking about it, there are so many different types of family in Malazan, and we can just stick with Gardens of the Moon. But I do think Malazan is a really great example in fiction, or is brimming with examples of what does family mean, how far does family go, to what extent can you construct your own family, and to what extent does blood determine family, or kind of being from the same species even count as being family? All these interesting questions. Now, I would argue some of the best representation of family is in Book 5, Midnight Tides. And I'm sure
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
who I'm thinking of, but we can't touch that right now.
yeah.
So pin in that.
Mm.
Sticking with Gardens of the Moon, you have a million different examples of family, and most of them are unconventional. And in fact, the most conventional family in the novel, and I will mention this because it's right at the start of the book,
Yeah, yeah,
barely in it, because I'm talking about the Paran family.
yes. Mm.
So for without going into huge spoilers, I'll just say the central family in Malazan are the Parans. You've got Ganawes or Ganous, depending on who the audiobook narrator is.
Hmm.
You've got Tavor or Tavore, depending on who the audible narrator is, and you've got Felicin or Felicin, depending on who the audible narrator is. So their names are constantly in flux, but hey, Malazan, that's fine.
Hmm.
Um, what's interesting about these three is they're brother and sisters. And they all appear in Malazan Book of the Fallen without getting into too many spoilers, but you rarely see them together on the page. Have you noticed that? I don't think we get many scenes, again,
Hmm.
trying to be a bit spoilers
Yeah,
vague,
yeah, that's right.
with these three characters interacting on the page. And what do you get in Gardens of the Moon? You get Ganawes, this is right at the start of the book.
Mm.
Ganawes walking into his estate, meeting his sister, having Tavore, having
Hmm.
a clipped discussion with Tavore, and then trying to go off and find Felicin. And I believe in this novel, Felicin doesn't appear on the page whatsoever. So
Hmm.
the first, I would argue, representation of nuclear family is immediately disrupted because the nuclear family doesn't even exist on the page in
Hmm.
Gardens of the Moon. And I
Hmm.
find that fascinating. And then what I'll stop wittering in a minute and I'll
That's
let
okay.
you pick this up,
Okay.
Shrikant.
Yeah.
But what replaces that in Gardens of the Moon? Well, you have the military companies who are and squads who band together and almost feel like a group of brothers. I mean, band of brothers is a kind of
Hmm. Yeah.
cliche for a
Yes.
reason.
Mm.
You have similarly essentially drinking buddies, right? All these people who come together in a bar, and
Mm.
okay, they're doing other things, but the reality is they meet in a bar every night, um, and that's a type of family. You have an uncle and nephew relationship
Hmm. Mm.
that is strained, I would argue, but also there. Um, and then you have the supernatural idea of family. And the fact that you know some of these gods who are still a bit shifty and vague in Gardens of the Moon, and in fact are consistently shifty and vague,
Hmm.
but the idea that you could argue could pair these gods as a type of family, or the fact that they are linked through some kind of blood or essence, and that's very kind of vague at this point. So I'll stop there.
Hmm.
But those are some
Yeah.
of the ways that I kind of view family as peeking through in Gardens of the Moon. What do you think about that? Or do you have any other examples?
I can tie into the gods because
Yeah.
since you and those watching the channel knows I talk about gods from time to time, and I had a video on how to create your own pantheon, or how to write your own pantheon. One of the things with pantheons, mostly in most mythologies and existing faith, is that they are family. So
Yes.
I think there is this sense of family in the pantheon that ties into Malasan. However, the as you describe the different relationships here, disrupted families, also the gods are disrupted and vague and skeptical, ironical, sarcastic, etc. You know, you have a broad um, let's say you have a broad plethora of ways the gods interfere and act, and also the ascendants. So we'll maybe go into that later, but it's part of
Hmm.
family, you know, to belong. I think Malasan has a lot to do with to belong, even if those people we read about are, on a search for some kind of identity, and they don't know at all what they are doing, but they want to belong somewhere.
I mean, this is connected to both spiritual. This is going to be the problem with this lenses discussion, is that a lot of these points can be applied to various lenses, which is the point of a lens, right? You can approach the same topic from a bunch of different perspectives.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm now immediately kicking myself for not thinking of Mother Dark, who
Hmm.
is the
Yeah.
most, both in terms of a spiritual, theological, pantheon perspective, and also from a family perspective.
Mm.
She is kind of the epicenter of so much of what goes on in Malazan. I don't know if you want to take that ball and carry it for a bit, or
Yeah,
because
we
I'd
can
like
do
to
that.
hear
I
your
think it
perspective
will.
on. I'd like to hear your perspective on Mother Dark and what's going on there as disrupted family.
Yeah, it is, and it's Anomandareke's son,
Hmm.
and I think the just for those listening now, I don't think can be a bit spoilerish, but I hope you can listen and maybe forget. It will be just on the surface. And you read about Anna Mandrake, and you hear about Mother Dark early in the Gardens of the Moon as well.
Hmm.
That is a special thing because it's it's a kind of a family relationship, but it's also a structural relationship which is tied into the Taisti Andi and you know, uh, their development as a race,
Hmm.
and their um, struggles for power, and all these things. So it's
Hmm.
very big, right? But also monarchies. Now I talk a little bit outside this. Monarchies are family too. I mean, in medieval Europe. So it's all about the family, and it's mostly all about the disrupted family. And I think that ties the Andy, ties into the Tilani Mass, for example, also their struggles and their fights and their adventures in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. They all search for, I don't know if all do that, but maybe a lot of them search for some kind of lost identity, and they want to resurrect some kind of stability in one way or the other.
There's definitely a tying together. It's so interesting hearing you talk about stability in this conversation of both family and gods. And as you're talking, what I'm kind of thinking of as well is the fact that, okay, I'm talking about Mother Dark being an example of family, and how unusual is that family is tied to um, theology. But we do that
Hmm.
in the real world too, right? I mean, in some ways, we could circle this back and examine some of our own theological perspectives. Or if we're not believers or believers, we can kind of link
Hmm.
this into our
Hmm.
existing thinking. Because
Hmm.
Christianity,
Yeah.
has the Trinity, God the Father,
Hmm.
um, and the Son. Like we have
Hmm.
this baked into our own worldviews, and
Hmm.
seeing this representation of parenthood tied to theology allows us to kind of bring that back on ourselves and scrutinize our own beliefs.
Hmm.
Um, One thing I really like that Erikson does in this regard, and I think he's really masterful at this, is he often takes a figure. This is not really a spoiler, but it could be interpreted as a spoiler. We're going to be saying that a lot, aren't we?
Hmm. Hmm.
Kind of for Carcanis,
Yeah. Hmm.
because what we have in Gardens of the Moon is, at least in my reading, the representation of Mother Dark is almost this kind of ethereal, powerful, larger than life presence
Hmm.
who, again, spoilers vague, this is kind of the premise of this story arc, abandons her children,
Hmm.
her disciples, whatever, and that leaves them with a real sense of loss and purposelessness. So it's almost like if you're viewing a race and culture as a family, the disappearance of that god leaves the whole structure bereft. And there's a real nihilistic element to the Tistandi as well, and the
Hmm.
fact that they're now trying to seek purpose,
Hmm.
because their parent figure has gone. And there's an analogy for that in the real world, right? If anyone has lost a parent or even just moves out of their parents' house and they have to find their own purpose. But what I like Erikson does, what I like that Erikson does in Carcanis, again keeping this kind of vague,
Hmm.
um, is he allows us to. He never quite. Again, spoilers. Mother Dark, we're allowed to criticize Mother Dark later on in the series. Can I put it that way?
Hmm.
Mother Dark stops being this huge, inscrutable, or relative, like hugely inscrutable. She becomes relatively inscrutable, but also in some way very, very human
Hmm.
character. And
Hmm.
and we're allowed to take these people that we held at such reverence
Hmm.
and awe, and begin to view them as real failed people. And that's also the sense for the Malazan pantheon as the whole, that we see them initially as these big scary figures, and they become basically squabbly nonsense half the
Yeah.
time, don't they? Yeah.
and they walk. I used to explain it. It's like a ladder with
Yes.
the gods, ascendants, and the mortals, and so on. They are walking up the ladder, down the ladder, and so on.
Hmm.
They change places, and they don't know where they are. So with Mother Dark, it goes in line with this shifting. They are not, gods put on a pedestal. You say, right? They are just gods.
Yes.
Behaving in very, or magical powers, or what you call them, in very strange ways. And I think that reflects the story of mm, what some people might think is difficult to understand. I mean, with Malazan, some say because it's fluctuating, it's always in flux. The
Yes.
humans and the races and the gods are in flux. So I think that goes with this Mother Dark description that you did just now.
So if we were going to maybe wrapping up the family conversation,
Mhm.
if I were to give you the impossible challenge of taking 10 books of this length or longer
Mm.
and collapsing it into Malazan Book of the Fallen's core message. I mean, I dispute there's a message, but kind of core
Mhm.
premise on family. Where would you take that? What do you think Erikson is trying to maybe get us to think about or consider regarding the word, the lens family?
I think it's just an idea, just right off the
Yeah.
bat. Uh, you know, I think it has a lot to do with the importance of wanting to belong to something. I mean, it's a kind of that he understands the struggle, that he understands the pain of not belonging, and yeah, that's how I would take it. It's about to belong, but also understand the struggle. Because as we have talked about, and we have talked about, Malazan is about the human condition, and one human condition is suffering. So without being religious in any way, but still suffering. We all suffer in one way or the other. And in Malazan, people suffer, but they find ways to try to prevent the suffering. So I think it's a lot about that. That's my take.
I enjoy that very much. It's so hard without going into spoilers, but you'll all know if you have any kind of clue about Malazan, there's a character called the Crippled God. And I think you could definitely talk about the character of the Crippled God being the way he is because of a lack of belonging. And
Mhm.
that's all I'll say about that. But
Yeah.
as you were talking, that's the first example that came up into my mind.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
you could also talk about maybe armies that serve an evil purpose. I mean, there's a few. I mean, yeah, it's difficult to talk about the word evil in Malazan when there's so many great characters, but
Hmm.
there are definitely a few armies in Malazan that are definitely on the. Okay, I'm going to say it. They're on the wrong side, right? Okay, and
Yeah.
we can quibble
Yeah.
about that, but they're definitely not up to good.
Mm.
Um, and what compels some of the members, and this is true of the real world as well, what compels someone to join an army that's so obviously foul?
Mm.
I mean, you could argue that it's a sense of belonging, at least to some extent. There's other things too, mass hysteria and propaganda, but just the sense of being part of something bigger than yourself is
Mm.
definitely there. Yeah.
And we should move on to another lens, but one, no spoiler, I think, just naming two persons. If you follow me on X from some time to time, I used to put out Malasan quotes when I have nothing to do.
Lovely.
And especially from Mappo and Icarium. I mean, without going too much into them, but their relationship and the journey they are on has meant a lot to me. If we talk about lenses, because it feels a bit lonely, and they want to try to find meaning. Um, I think, yeah, relationships and meaning and belonging. It ties into other. So if you are on Gardens on the Moon, this will continue. You will find characters you hopefully root for and that are very beautiful, poetic, and you can feel their pain. And I think you can learn a lot from them. And Mappo and Ikariam for me was two persons like that. So let's move on to another lens. I will throw out the because we can talk for hours about this, and I really love it. I love Malasan, as you know.
I
Uh,
think,
uh,
sorry, I was gonna, I don't mean to interrupt you whatsoever. I just was going to say next time we do this, we should definitely choose one lens and chew it to pieces because,
yes,
yeah, yeah. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
yeah. Just move on to maybe more, thing everyone has heard of if you listen to Erickson. I think. I think I will bunch these two together, the archaeological lens and the mythological lens. I think they can go maybe hand in hand. Maybe you don't
Why?
think so. I think
Oh,
that,
I agree with you.
yeah.
I'm just curious to hear your thoughts there.
Um, I explained to my mother-in-law why this book was so fascinating, and I said that I'm sitting, yeah, you see the wall here. I said that the fascinating thing with Malazan and archaeology is that I can scratch the wall here, like this one, scratch the roof here, or the floor, maybe it's better. Now I just see the floor, and then I scratch or dig, not scratch, I dig. I will find a skeleton, and then I will find a fortress, and then I will find some history, and then I will find a myth. Um, Maybe it's a temple, maybe it's some book, a scroll, anything like that. I think that's my connection with how I connect archaeology and mythology in Malazan, and I think that's for me, but that's my lens, you could say. Since I'm, yoga practitioner and all these kind of things, I really like it and are fascinated by that. It really triggers me, and I get really excited by this. And I mean, Erickson itches this trigger a lot. So.
Do you know, I might have told this story somewhere before. I I think it was during COVID. During COVID, when I was locked in my house, I decided to listen to a lecture a day. Just went online, typed in, whatever, Harvard, and then I just typed something in and see what would come up. And I watched a few Harvard lectures on the ancient Greeks. And what was fascinating about doing this is the first lecture, I'll see if I can dig it up. I might be misremembering this. The lecture was on an ancient Greek culture before the ancient Greeks. It was like the people who came before. And they lived on one of the Greek islands. This is very vague, forgive me. And basically, what the lecturer said is these people lived however many thousands of years ago. We know virtually nothing about them. Here are some, some shrapnel, if I can use that word again, of their
Mhm.
life, some pottery, whatever. We know we were there. We know how long they were there. They are no longer there, and they left no kind of historical record or writing. And this appalled me in the best possible way. It really did shake me because what it made me realize is that there were people just like me, who lived, who went on walks with girls or boys and looked up at the sun and started taking a stick and swooshing through the grass or whatever you do. And then you grow older and you think about how to provide for your family, or you go out fishing when you have a day to yourself. The culture was different, but they were still people.
Mhm.
And it genuinely rocked me to my core, not to be too hyperbolic,
Mhm.
that the realization that people thousands of years ago are not just a note in a textbook. They were as vivid and vibrant and real as I am. And I think that's something that Malazan does so well in its kind of archaeological examination, is showing you that 10,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago was not
Mhm.
just a footnote in history. It's vivid and real, and we are a consequence of those people as
Mhm.
well. And yeah, so without getting into specific examples yet, that was the story that came to mind there. I'd love to hear you talk about specific examples of archaeology in Malazan or mythology, as the case is.
Mhm. Yeah, and in very very simply put, with the mythology in Malazan, you have the first of all, you have the history of gods, you have the history of empires, you have the history of ascendants, etc. I mean, and you have followers. And one thing with mythology and divinity, I would say, in Malazan is that if there are no believers, the god dies.
Yes,
I like that. Actually, that's how it is in reality too, I suppose,
yes.
because we talk about, sometimes we say, on my channel, I always say some are existing faith, etc. Still mythology, and then we have mythology, which we say Norse mythology more in a way because it doesn't exist. It exists for a minority in Sweden, but very very few. It's
Mhm.
something past. I think the
Are there still existing? Sorry, forgive me for the
yeah
for the tangent. There are still existing practitioners of
yeah
Norse
a
beliefs.
small group. It's growing, but it's I don't know. Maybe there are 1,000 people in Sweden, so it's not a huge thing.
Is it maybe you're not sure, or is it like a reclamation of that kind of cultural aspect or genuine belief or a mix?
Some are genuine belief. Yeah,
That's so
it's
interesting.
kind of protest as well, because now Buddha, we can talk a bit about that. Buddhism has become growing in Sweden, for example, among Swedes. So it's kind of protest, We have our own gods, we have our own polytheistic heritage,
Yeah,
etc. So why not use that instead of, you know, taking the
yeah,
Buddhist way or the Hindu way or anything like that. So
yeah,
it's, but that's exactly how it is in Malasan too. If you don't believe in the gods, they die. So if you don't believe in the Christian God, for example, the Christian God, that's not to offend anyone, but then the Christian God will lose in popularity and uh, be less popular at least. And in Malasan, the fact is that affects gods and descendants, so they can't act. For example, they can become forgotten.
yes.
So there's a strong mythological aspect, and you also have the deck of dragons, which I'm especially interested in,
Hmm.
because of all the tarot and there is an old HBO series called Carnivala. I don't know if you watched that or anyone watching, but I really recommend it. It's a bit scary, but it's very good. Um, the gods' connection to the deck of dragons and also the mortals and other races connections to deck of dragon really pumps up this mythological feeling of Malassans. That's very, very briefly my take on mythology. But I think you also can feel that Erikson is. He told me he wasn't, it was on the broadcast. I have to think first. He wasn't, a believer. He's no believer. He's not a believer still, I think, but he was very secular. I understood him when he started to write Malazan, but as time went on, maybe age and so on, became more reflective on, things like spirituality. There is also a lot of meditation in Malazan. They meditate. They drink tea. That's definitely my lens, since I drink a lot of tea and are interested in East Asian teas as well. But still, they drink these teas and they have the ceremonies of different ways in Malazan. So I think the mythological and archaeological is so strong. And you have all the tombs and graves, not to spoil
Yes.
too much, but there are obviously tombs outside Darujistan, for example. So have patience.
And I'm just thinking now. I know we agreed kind of beforehand to keep the discussion relatively on Malazan Book of the Fallen, and
Mm.
here I am having referenced Carcanis, and I'm going to go on and reference Ian C. Esselmon's
Mhm. Yeah.
novels of the Malazan Empire.
Mhm.
Esselmon also plays with all of these things really, really deftly. Oh, there you go.
Mhm.
Um, I'm thinking of certain structures in Return of the Crimson Guard that I won't bring up, but are very, both blisteringly ancient and seem to have spiritual significance. Uh, and then you also have in his Path to Ascendancy series something really interesting going on, which is the you could talk about Orb Scepter Throne, forgive me. You could talk about that in terms of
Mhm.
mythology and archaeology for days.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I'm also thinking about Paths to Ascendancy, that because what happens at the start of the Malazan Empire is source of its own myth. And I know we usually define myth as something that happened in epochs and ages
Mhm.
past.
Mhm.
Um, but there's also the sense of modern myth making, like people 100 years ago balloon in our eyes to
Mhm.
huge, huge status. I mean, I'm thinking actually, again, to derail it, of Bob Dylan. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
whenever I tell people I'm a fan of Bob Dylan, do you know what they say? Every single time, people who don't know Bob Dylan, I say, I love Bob Dylan.
Mhm.
First of all, they say, you pretentious hack. And I go, yes.
Mhm.
And then the second thing they say is, he's still alive. Because most
Mhm.
people who seem to know of Bob Dylan kind of from a very kind
Mhm.
of on the edge standpoint
Mhm.
think he's dead.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's because of his age. I think that's because Bob Dylan has reached a level of almost mythos in our culture. Um, it's uncomfortable to think of him still with us because he has kind of embedded himself in the cultural consciousness so much. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah, it
almost
does.
easier to put him
Yeah.
in the past rather
And
than
then,
having being like a living, breathing entity around us. And I think, sorry, just to cap off my point
mm,
there, so that's an example of a modern kind of myth figure. I would say Bob Dylan. I think people kill off Bob Dylan for that reason, and I
yeah.
hope he stays alive for many more years. But I'm thinking of spoiler free. I'm
Mm.
thinking of Emperor Kellenved and
Mhm.
his assistant uh, Dancer, and the fact that although they don't step on the page in Gardens of the Moon,
Mhm.
and their actions in creating the Malazan Empire, I believe, are about a century long.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
they are themselves. a myth. They have become of mythical status.
Yeah.
Um, and I think one thing I really like about Paths to Ascendancy, and it's something Esselmont has to be very careful about in his writing, is both keeping that myth strong in Malazan Book of the Fallen as a whole, and yet also kind of picking apart these characters and seeing how they work. Just like Erikson does in Carcanis with Mother Dark.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you have
So
this zoom in, zoom out perspective. I used to say that with Malazan. You sometimes you're at structural level, or god level, ascendant level, etc. So power, kings and queens, if we say it, put it simply. And then we're
yeah.
on the individual level with the armies, for example. You
Yes.
see them play games, they joke, they drink beer, and they banter, etc. So you have these. Yeah, so I think that's true. That how do they keep the mythological feeling of, yeah, for example, uh, Lassine, Kellenvid, and other people. It's a interesting thing, maybe a tricky thing. I don't know if the story might lose its magic if they come too close the real
Yes.
reality. Yeah.
Well, this is the interesting thing. You mentioned reality. I think one reason I think we'd both agree regarding real world myths is we construct these myths to explain the world as it is today. We
Mhm.
invoke magic in eons past to explain the present day. But
Mhm.
there's an interesting counterpoint there to Malazan, isn't there? Just talking about reality and the soldiers' daily lives and keeping mythology alive. Magic exists in this world. Magic blisters on the page
Mhm.
and bristles on the page in Malazan. So I do find it interesting that what the people of Wu might feel the need to explain and give an account of, given the fact that magic and the creation of magic and the wonder of magic still very much exists. But that maybe I'm blowing us off course again.
Nice, and there you have another spiritual connection. There are a lot of concepts. Wu, for example, we just I mean that's a
Yeah.
concept, strong concept in Taoism, for example. So without making any comparisons, uh,
Can you explain that a little bit more?
It's called Wu Wei actually. So maybe not only the word. It's me doing things effortless, the path of least resistance. Yeah, it's very simply put, go with the flow. Don't try too much.
I have
Don't,
students like that.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, right, right. Yeah. But yeah, exactly. Don't try too much. Don't achieve. No ambition. The water flows naturally in the forest, for example, in a small river. Mm. Everything works out fine. The nature moves. I mean, the winter comes and then it melts, comes water. The nature doesn't do anything. So that's kind of wu way from my understanding. So this is a big topic in Taoist or that kind of circles. What
There's
is
a lot to explore there. I mean, I don't know why. I don't know if Ericsson and Esselmont call the Malazan world Woo, or if that's something the fans have cooked up. But I think there's definitely
Yeah,
a route to go down there. Yeah.
yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were aware of this. At least both Stephen, but also Ian C. Esselmont, which I believe have a lot of inspiration from East Asia in his world building. With Li Heng, for example, and then how the city is structured and
Yes.
so on. So,
Yes. And
um,
then and then forgive me if I'm mistaken here. Kellenved in book one of Path to Ascendancy, again without spoiling anything, is called Wu. That's the name he gives at the beginning. Is that right, or am I making that up?
I don't remember actually, so I'm not sure.
I'll
Maybe
check that.
someone
I'll,
here
I'll
on the channel
comment
can
later.
can comment on that. I think
Yes.
I don't think it's random by the authors, but that might be maybe an
No.
idea. I don't know, or maybe they thought just the word sounded cool. I don't know. That could happen as well, right?
Yeah.
Um, should we just jump a few lenses further to
Yeah,
just
let's choose
so,
another
so the
one.
listeners understand what lenses can be and how we can um, describe them and interpret them. I just changed a subject totally to um, philosophical and political lens. Just throw it out. You can choose, you can draw in which lens you want to, if you want to.
Do you want to? Should we choose one, or do you want to do both?
We can do
Which
the,
one? Which one appeals to you more?
I think philosophical in a way, and but that it ties into maybe political in a way, not political as we talk in a modern society. But one thing I think about is the civilization concept versus the tribe, for example, and the
Yes.
implications of that. It's a common, that's a common theme in all Malazan books, the civilization and the tribe.
I think there's also maybe we could talk about this is the thing we could talk about
Mm.
all of these and they all kind of
Yeah.
interconnect, but all also bear their own sort of product. Because just talking about that, what I immediately think of culture, and the way culture determines one's philosophy. If a book is really good, as Gardens of the Moon is, um, you do get the sense that the place of one's birth and the circumstances of one's birth,
Mm.
and this goes back to family too, determines your worldview. As much as we like to think that we are these amazing critical human beings who can kind of abstract themselves from their context, no one can except me. I mean, I'm the only one, Shrikant, and it took a lot of effort. No,
Hmm.
but genuinely, like, how I was born south side of Glasgow to a nice, in a nice kind of suburban, wee villagey, tranquil countryside space.
Mm.
In the Scottish context, growing up at the time of kind of the seeds of referendum, and then as I hit my kind of late teens, it's Brexit, all that kind of stuff. That being said, at the same time, I'm giving everyone information to dox me. My family also have roots in Northern Ireland, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Largely growing up going to church contexts and things like that. All of this stuff severely impacts me and the way I think.
Mm.
The fact that I drew an analogy from Mother Dark to Christianity as opposed to some
Hmm.
other religion, it's not because I am this incredibly critical human being who made the first connection. You could have made the connection to kind of ancient fertility gods and things like that, but I chose Christianity because
Hmm.
that's where that's the soup I was kind of soaked in as a
Hmm.
kid.
Yeah.
And I really like, as Malazan does, I have to once again hijack this conversation,
Hmm.
that Malazan is very aware that where you grow up and the people you grew up around
Mm.
determines who you are. And I love that you spoke about kind of maybe tribes versus cities, or
Mm.
nomadic peoples versus kind of rooted people, or however you want to articulate that
Hmm.
as the example of kind of philosophy. Because I think philosophy equals, or sorry, worldview equals philosophy,
Hmm.
unless you're thinking about kind of abstract philosophical thinking.
Yeah.
And your worldview is determined by your place that you were born in.
Mm.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that or any kind of specific examples.
No, I mean that's very true. And I think also, I mean that you apply your lens and how you interpret from culture, which culture you choose to maybe feel biased to or in Malasan or feel more adverse to. Um, I think the um, perspective also has to do that because you froze, David. I don't know if you hear me. Your picture froze a bit. Can you hear me, David? We're just waiting and David here, see if he comes alive.
I've frozen.
Yeah, now I hear you.
Can you hear me? Hello,
Yeah,
hello, hello,
yeah,
hello,
now I
hello.
see you and you
So
move. Yeah,
I
great.
don't have internet in this apartment until the 25th. So
Yeah,
I'm riding the wave of data. So forgive me, that was my
no, it's
fault.
okay. Ian CS, he
Yeah.
must used to be in, I think he's in Alaska and he freezes a lot.
The place where Wi-Fi goes to die, I'm sure,
Yeah.
Alaska. Yeah.
But as to answer your question or perspective, I think the you can choose sides in Malasan, which you side with from a cultural point of view, but you also got very humble because the since Erikson switched sides, first we follow this tribe or this group or people, and then you switch side. You become very humble from a cultural point. I don't know if it is like that. That was the effect for me. I was much
Yeah.
more, I knew what I thought was right before I read Malazan. I had not totally strong, but quite strong views on society. Then
Hmm.
I got recommended by a friend to read Malazan. I don't know.
That's a good friend.
Yeah, it was a really good
Yeah.
friend and a really good advice. I've been trapped in this now for many years in a good way, so that's great. But I also became more humble because I started to understand that you can view things from different perspectives. And Malasan helped me with that a lot, actually, especially when it comes to things like culture and so, not being too rigid, you could say. It's very flowy, Malasan. The
Yes.
we can interpret that at least, I think. in the
Yeah,
culture.
and I think again the word culture can mean so many things, right? It can mean your nuclear family, that is a culture.
Mm,
Your community, your village. A lot of classic older fantasies, farm boy grows up in village. That's a culture, and
mm,
it's a deliberately empty culture. So then when he explores other kind of communities,
mm,
you feel them a lot more kind of with more flavor, if you like. And then you also have the wider culture of country, continent, world, in Malazan realm. It,
mm,
it goes on and on and on. But no, I totally agree with what you're saying. From my perspective, I read Malazan. I mentioned this in my What Malazan Means to Me video that I shot quite early on in my channel. And it's all about the fact that I read Malazan during a great period of transformation personally for
mm,
myself. I just
mm,
moved to the USA for a year, and my mind was kind of blown open because there's, believe it or not, Scotland is relatively homogenous, less so now,
yeah,
but
yeah.
certainly when I was growing up.
Mm,
You know what I mean? And so going to the States and encountering such a number of cultural backgrounds and worldviews all kind of smooshed together in an international campus was genuinely eye-opening.
mm,
And reading that alongside Malazan, I think was a really kind of wonderful experience for me to kind of go, wait,
mm,
the world
mm,
is big and I am
yeah.
small, and
Mm,
that's wonderful. I think doing those two things in concert with one another really did kind of propel me forward on my own personal journey, which I'm sure is not the reason anyone clicked on this video. But yeah, it's again, this is why we do lenses, right? Because well, first of all, you can go the academic route and really kind of get into
mhm.
granular aspects of the text through these lenses. It also allows you to explore yourself more.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah, and I think that's why we read too, to make, maybe not everyone reads to make a journey, but books affects us, so it's part of our journey anyway. I think the perspective of living in the US and reading the book, me being here in Sweden, feeling very convinced about how things were, reading and getting more, I think definitely more humble, more open-minded, but maybe more, I would say, cynical or skeptical. There is this trait of uh, anti-intellectualization, right? Among some characters in Malazan Book of the Fallen. I don't want to spoil this too much, or maybe not at all. But if you continue further, even maybe already in the Gardens of the Moon, there are people who are very much against civilization, and they against philosophy, making doing philosophy and such things.
So maybe we're not just talking about from a philosophical or a cultural lens. We're maybe just talking about a broadly epistemological lens now, aren't we?
Mhm.
Um, how much do we know, and how confident can we be of what we know?
Yeah, right.
And how can we get ourselves aware of our ignorance, which
Mm,
is easier said than done. Because if we knew what our ignorance was, we could tackle it. But
mm.
we don't know where our ignorance lies, generally speaking.
Yeah. Um, I tie
And
into.
there's
Oh, sorry.
you
Continue.
go. I was just going to say there are so many characters who are so certain. I mean, certainty is people talk about compassion in Malazan, but
Mm,
I think certainty versus uncertainty is an equally strong theme.
mm,
And there are so many characters in Malazan that are just so certain of themselves, and usually they're not the people we vibe with. It's the people who are uncertain and working things out and still trying to be compassionate that are the ones we sort of begin to gel with. And I think that's very interesting because it mirrors the reader's own journey as they're
mm,
trying to work out what's going on and trying to keep a handle on things and who to quote unquote root for.
mm,
I mean, I would argue personally that in the first spoilers,
mm,
uh, the bridge burner squad in Malazan
mm,
are a great example of kind of maybe knowing what's going on, but maybe not fully, and some maybe
mm,
more than others, and them just kind of weathering the storm and being true to each other.
mm.
And you could even argue, spoilers, that by the end of the book, they still don't quite know what's going on.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, they're continuing, and I think that's partly why, even though you could argue that the bridge burners in the Malazan Empire are quote unquote the bad guys, as I know some people have,
Mm, mm,
you
mm,
still root for them because they are more comfortable with the lack of certainty than
mm.
certain other characters in the text.
Yeah, and I think that goes on. I mean, that kind of, being certain or not certain or what to know or not know. I think for me as a reader, it continues. I'm on my first reread then on Bone Hunters, as the viewers know here. And I start to question a lot of things about my understanding of Malazan from reading Ian C. Esselmont and the Carcanes, for example. So you really are in this confusion in a positive way. But if we are honest to ourselves, at least that's my perception, that's how life is. We create our meaning, and we think it's good, and it's good if it's good. So that's great. But still, we can do. I mean, we can live life in many other ways. We can have other point of views or other political views. We don't know really what's true, but we try to find a truth in this. I think
Yeah.
Malazan shows that very well as well.
And it's okay to return to your original perspective on something, right? Like that's
Hmm.
fine.
Hmm.
Very often people will go on a spiritual journey or quest, or not even spiritual, could be emotional, could be political, and
Hmm.
then land right back where they first came to. But the
Yeah.
important thing is the struggle,
Hmm.
is the reflection, is the attempt.
Hmm.
And the importance of I'm just waffling now. The
Hmm.
importance of embracing your own uncertainty and seeking to wrestle with it and identify with it. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm
Did we
just
touch many examples there? I guess we did. We talked about a couple.
yeah.
Yeah.
Should we, because we I think we had an hour, you said, right? So I just
Yeah.
check the time a bit so we don't
How are we doing? What
we
time are we
are
on?
six, it's 4:10, so it's probably 10:10 at your, or what time in Japan?
It's, but you know, yeah, it's late here. 11:15, but that's okay. I'm a night owl. But listen, what we can do
Huh? Yeah,
is
right. It's late. Yeah.
like I think we've got through what like half of our list.
Hmm.
So we could just do a part two as well. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like
yeah, yeah,
I think
definitely.
any of these lenses we could have explored um with a massive pickaxe, drill, shovel,
Yeah, definitely.
excavator. So there's certainly more to talk about. And listen, I'm always game to talk about Malazan.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And also to the viewers, if you want to add lenses, please do for upcoming discussions. And I want to mention the other lenses we haven't gone through just for the viewers so they have an idea what's to come.
Next time,
Yeah,
coming soon. Sorry.
cliffhanger. Military lens, social class, humor, uh,
Mm,
humor lens. Everyone who's read, if you haven't read Malazan yet, so there is a lot of humor, soldier banter. It's very funny. And actually, we have talked about the impermanence lens. We almost
yes, yes,
forgot,
big one.
right? But we can
And
talk.
purpose as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Great. Thank you, David, for, and I'm becoming a bit formal here, but thank you for being on the channel. We will do a part two definitely. And as I said, those watching, please add more perspective or be part of the discussion and comment here on the community page or on this video in the comment field. So thank you very much and see you later. And thank you, David, for being here.
of course. It was a pleasure, really. Appreciate it, mate.